Life as We Know It with Tom Walton.
Many years ago, when I worked for a block communications newspaper in California, a colleague came to me one day and shared his embarrassment and chagrin for overreacting to a mistake by one of his staff members. I was impressed both by my colleague's mea culpa and by his simple explanation. Suspending the employee, he said, seemed like a good idea at the time. His candor and regret were admirable, even if the harshness of his discipline was not. I've never forgotten those simple words. It seemed like a good idea at the time. If you think about it, it's the perfect excuse, one that can be applied to almost any situation. Take politics, please. Policy blunders can be explained away simply. Even a chronic liar gets a pass because, in all likelihood, his or her deception truly seemed like a good idea at the time. When Richard Nixon's involvement in the cover-up of the Watergate burglary of Democratic National Headquarters became known, all he had to say was, well, it seemed like a good idea at the time, and we all would have believed he meant it. How about Ronald Reagan and the Iran-Contras? The Teflon president and great communicator could have used one simple explanation. It seemed like a good idea at the time. We'd have loved him for it. John Kennedy, another president who often got special treatment from the press, could have explained away his greatest blunder, the Bay of Pigs invasion in Cuba, in similar fashion. It seemed like a good idea at the time. In defense of President Kennedy, I think we can assume that the president's counterpart in the old Soviet Union at the time, Nikita Khrushchev, said the same thing when he was forced by Kennedy's blockade of Cuba to withdraw his missiles. I imagine Khrushchev standing before the Politburo and explaining why he sent missiles to Cuba in the first place. Comrades, he said, it seemed like a good idea at the time. And what about the artful dodger himself, Bill Clinton? Rather than stand before the nation at a press conference and declare, I did not have sex with that woman, Ms. Lewinsky, he could have simply acknowledged his dalliance with a young lady with the simplest of excuses. It seemed like a good idea at the time. Millions of men all across America would have nodded in silent agreement. Politicians, however, are hardly the only offenders. Errors in judgment are made by all of us, and if we're being honest, almost on a daily basis. Sometimes we learn from them, sometimes we don't. Occasionally, they can be major life-changing mistakes. You could change jobs and instantly regret leaving the one you had. You could marry a guy and find out 6 months later he's a jerk. You could buy a used car that looked beautiful on Crazy Eddie's lot, but died the next day in your driveway. You could tell your boss how stupid you consider his plan to install a unisex bathroom for the whole office. In every case, you would have had the perfect response when asked to explain your lapse in judgment. It seemed like a good idea at the time. I certainly don't excuse myself in this regard. It's entirely possible that today's little episode of Life as We Know It has failed miserably in its intent. If so, all I can tell you is this. When I sat down to write it, it seemed like a good idea at the time.
Life as We Know It is written and hosted by Tom Walton and is a production of WGTE Public Media. Life as We Know It with Tom Walton can be heard on WGTE FM 91 every Monday afternoon during All Things Considered at 5:44 p.m. Or hear past episodes at WGTE.org/life.